We are now live.
Excellent. Can we get a roll, please?
Good morning. Yes. Chair Balducci. Absence is noted. Vice Chair Santiago.
Present.
Regent Williams.
Present.
Regent Yang.
Here.
And welcome to our ex officio, Charlene Casamento. Chancellor Meduco, welcome our university CFOs and presidents, President Toro, President Bernal, President Bulmer, and our college presidents, Klonowski and Royale. Vice Chair Santiago, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody being here today. Let's start things off with Chancellor remarks. Chancellor Meduco.
Hey, good morning, Vice Chair Santiago. Hopefully it's sunnier where you are than here in lovely Connecticut. So a couple things. Good to see our presidents and our institutional CFOs here in person. It is a very busy time of year, not only in terms of running their respective institutions. You know, we are in the heat of things as it relates to the spring semester. But this time of year, it's okay. This time of year, from developing mid-year spending plans to our preparations for the appropriations hearing tomorrow and everything else in between, I recognize the level, the sheer volume of work that's taken place you know, across our system, so they need to be commended. Really want to thank our CFOs and also CFO Mike Moriarty, who've all come together as a CFO council for the betterment of our system, sharing best practices, leaning on each other as we've prepared the materials for today's committee meeting and also for tomorrow's appropriation hearing. So it's been all hands on deck. But I also recognize that we are a work in progress as a system, right? There are a lot of things that we have to improve. We own that, we recognize that. We look forward to partnering with our regents, with this committee, both voting and non-voting members of this committee to make us a better functioning and operating system. And then lastly, as it relates to our finances, is really important that we all recognize that, you know, our planning, the decisions that will be made, it's in the multiple years, right? It's a multi-year planning and thinking that we need to help us address not only the concerns, but also for us to maximize the opportunities on the horizon. So just want to thank everyone here involved. Thanks for our staff for setting up today's meeting. And Vice Chair Santiago, I pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Meduco. Appreciate those remarks, and I think those of us on the committee certainly recognize the hard work that's gone into this. And as you've noted, with a lot of other things going on, and we also, and we'll get through this, but we also appreciate the diligence that's put into sort of the mid-year update and sort of revising projections. I think this exercise and continuing to reflect and refine is a building block to help us to a brighter future. So thank you for that. Let's kick this off. I'm looking for a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes. Can I get a motion for prior meeting minutes approval? I got a motion from Regent Yang, and I need a second. Okay, I'll second it. All those, any comments or discussion around the meeting minutes? Hearing on none, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, meeting minutes are approved. Let's continue down the agenda. I'd like to just spend a quick minute introducing someone that Chancellor Meduco mentioned, which is System CFO, which is Charter Oak CFO, Michael Moriarty. With Dr. Lloyd Blanchard, our System CFO, temporarily out of the office, the system has asked Michael Moriarty, the CFO of Charter Oak, to step in on select matters, including supporting the Finance Committee for today's meeting, as well as other items. By way of background, Michael joined Charter Oak 9 years ago, coming from leadership ranks at Deloitte. In his first year, he split time between Charter Oak and the system office to kind of get an overview and understanding of how everything works. And we believe this background will serve him well during this interim period while CFO Blanchard's out of the office. So with that as some background to CFO Moriarty's role today, I'm going to hand it off to CFO Moriarty to take it from here and get us through the meeting agenda and format. Mike?
Thank you, Vice Chair Santiago. Good morning, everyone. I'm pleased to be joined today by the Chief Financial Officers from each of our institutions, along with several of our presidents who will provide a financial update for their campuses. As reflected on your agenda, we have 3 action items that require Finance Committee approval today. We also included 2 informational items in the committee materials related to contracts. And based on the type and size of these contracts, we are required to bring them to the committee for awareness and transparency, but they do not cross the threshold where it requires committee action or approval. Today's meeting is 90 minutes long, and we have a very full agenda. So I'd like to get us started to ensure we have enough time to get through the materials. First on the agenda is an item related to Western Connecticut State University. And with that, I will turn it over to President Bernal to walk us through this wonderful item related to their campus.
Thank you, and thank you, Regents. I'll be really brief and really want to spend some time honoring our former colleague at WestConn, Dr. Carol Hawks. This is really a proud moment for the university. Today, I'm requesting your approval to officially name the Dr. Carol A. Hawks Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching at WestConn. This will enable us to achieve our commitment of 100% applied learning embedded throughout the curriculum through faculty training, incentivizing that work with our faculty and student grants. Dr. Hawks is a foundational figure at WestConn. I've heard stories about her since my arrival, and it's really an honor to get to learn about her legacy. She served the university for more than 2 decades in roles of such as the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences. She was also an associate provost in the provost office for academic affairs, and she was the founding dean of our hallmark School of Visual and Performing Arts, which you know thrives today. She passed away last summer at the age of 102, leaving a really strong legacy. You know, the mayor told me, former mayor said that she was an icon in Danbury as well when she would, with her 107-year-old mom, go to all of the diners in Danbury. So, you know, they have a long legacy in the region as well. So we spent a lot of time really thinking about how best to honor what she cared most about. This is a rare $3.3 million unrestricted gift. And we talked to a lot of people who knew her, and we firmly believe this proposal honors the legacy that she believed that WestConn was really built through the people who teach, support, and mentor our students. So the center is designed to be our academic hub for instructional innovation, faculty development, and applied learning pedagogy. And for us, this is not just a symbolic naming, it is working infrastructure to improve student success at scale. The WCSU Foundation has approved this proposal, and we presented it to the Academic and Student Affairs Committee as an action item as well. So we're respectfully requesting the board's approval to name the center in Dr. Carol Hawks' honor.
President Bernal, thank you very much for that. I just want to know, do any of the committee members have any comments or questions before we kind of move to the resolution of this?
Congratulations. It's a good win.
Yep. Thank you, Ted. Listen, well, I'll just say this, President Bernal, having had the opportunity to see you present this twice now, it's no less impressive or exciting. Really demonstrates the meaning that WestConn has for the community, for the learners there, and of course for the longtime faculty. So I'll give you the floor to present the resolution. Hello?
Sorry, Regent Santiago. So the resolution is the naming of WCSU Center for Learning and Teaching, the Dr. Carol A. Hawks Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. Whereas Dr. Carol Hawks served the Western Connecticut State University for 24 years, engaging in work that had a lasting impact on WestConn's academic and artistic future. During Dr. Hawks' tenure, she served in leadership roles such as the Dean of School of Arts and Sciences and the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs. Dr. Hawks established the School of Visual and Performing Arts and serves as its founding dean. During the course of her career, in 2012, she was awarded the Presidential Medal in recognition of her significant and lasting contributions to students, faculty, and the WestConn community. The funds generously provided by Dr. Hawks will provide $1.5 million to support the Carol Hawks Faculty Teaching and Learning Center, $300,000 to the Hawks Catalyst Fund and a University Fellows Program to provide recognition and seed funding for excellence in innovation and academic development, and $1.5 million to establish a strategic reserve to address future strategic initiatives. So that's being held off for a decision later. I've endorsed this, the renaming of this, and submitted to the Board of Regents. So be it resolved that the Board of Regents for Higher Education hereby approves the naming of the WCSU Center for Learning and Teaching, the Dr. Carol A. Hawks Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching.
Great, I'll make that motion.
If you need a motion to adopt a resolution and the naming gift, I would make that motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Regent Williams. I'll second that motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. All right, the resolution is approved. Thank you very much, President Bernal. CFO Moriarty, I'll give it back to you to kick off the mid-year plan review.
Thank you. And if we could stay on this cover slide for a moment, please, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. The slides we're going to provide in this next section is a high-level summary of each of the campuses' fiscal year 2026 mid-year financial plans and projections as compared to the original approved budget. Each campus will speak to the overall trends they are experiencing across revenues, expenditures, transfers, and ultimately their bottom line. For campuses currently projecting a deficit, they are also prepared to explain how that deficit will be funded, whether through campus reserves, system office reserves, or in some cases, a combination of both. Several campuses have also included informational context on their key initiatives. While those items are not the primary focus of today's agenda and may not be covered verbally, the added detail that's been included in the slides may be helpful to the committee in understanding what is underway at each campus. To keep us on schedule while still allowing a meaningful discussion, I'd like to suggest to the committee that we hold our questions for a Q&A session after each of the campuses, but I defer to the committee on that matter. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, please. To kick things off, I'd like to briefly summarize our consolidated system-wide outlook. Overall, our revenues are up 16 million or 1.4%. Largely driven by tuition and fees associated with enrollment exceeding our expectations. We've highlighted this in green as a favorable trend. You will see throughout the materials that we have also highlighted red items as unfavorable trends. And if something is not highlighted at all and it remains in black, it tends to be a neutral result. On the expenditure side for the system, we are generally tracking in line with our budget at the system level. Like many colleges and universities out there nationwide, we are experiencing inflationary pressures, including vendor increases that can exceed the standard inflation rates that we've grown accustomed to, particularly in the areas where we had limited supplier options. As a system, we will collectively need to continue looking for opportunities to leveraging our purchasing power, where we could try and continue to hold cost increases to a minimal level. Transfers, which reflect a combination of set-asides for debt service and other items, are currently tracking above plan. You will see that these are marked in black, however, since not all set-asides represent cost overages in the current year. I have asked Central to elaborate further during their segment on transfers, as management across the system is working to strengthen how transfers are presented in future financial presentations. Finally, our projected deficits at the system level are improving, moving from $141 million down to $133 million. While this consolidated picture is modestly favorable, we are ultimately a system of 6 institutions plus a system office, each with its unique set of drivers and circumstances. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to President Toro and CFO Lisa Buscher of Central Connecticut State University to provide their update next. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the committee. Good morning, members of this system office team. Good morning to our colleagues. I am pleased to present the numbers for the mid-year projections for Central. Let me start by saying that our revenues, the projected revenues are up versus the budget because we had a significant increase in enrollment for fall 2025, and we did better than we projected originally or assumed in the budget in terms of housing occupancy. The enrollment increase without considering dual and concurrent enrollment was 5.2%, and the increase in housing occupancy versus the assumption was 6.5%. So that represents a 3.1% increase in revenues. By the same token, we had an increase in expenditures, mainly because of the following factors: an increase in financial aid versus what we were budgeting, an increase in the food service contract. As you may know, Sodexo achieved an agreement with its union that alone did cost us over $600,000 for this year. In addition to that, we saw some increases in utilities and therefore OE and in other contracts. It's because of inflation, and that increase in cost was 1.3%. Let me then talk a little bit about the transfers, and I will ask our finance expert to help me with the transfers, because honestly, I don't agree with the way we present the transfers. And so we spent a lot of time yesterday she was trying to convince me that I was wrong, and I was trying to convince her that she was wrong. But anyway, the challenge with the transfers is that we are including set-asides that go to our reserve, and those are not expenditures, in addition to real expenditures. So we are combining things, apple and oranges here. So, and that combination results in $19 million. But talking about the real increases in costs as part of the transfers, let me, or the differences between the 12.1 million and the 19 million, that difference is due to the following. First, originally, we were assuming that 25% of our debt payment for residential, for our residence hall was going to come from reserve. Given that we did better than anticipated, the decision was made that we are going to pay 100% of that debt service from operating expenditures. The other difference here is that we did set aside, and here's where our difference comes. We set aside some funding for to replenish the reserve for residence hall, given that we had an increase in housing occupancy. We have to equip new dorms and new rooms, and that was a cost that then we decided to cover and move some money to the reserve for that purpose. The same was true with the food services. We were had underway a big project for our main dining facility, and we were concerned about some equipment there, so we set aside some funding for that. And Lisa will share with you why we were able to set aside that funding and how we used the old policy. We took advantage of that.
President Toro, so I think the question has come up, what would change the reserves from budget to projected going forward? So basically, what President Toro explained was we have the autonomy to make decisions on how we're paying for our debt, whether it's from operating or if we have reserves set aside, we can make that decision. The other place that we can do, based on the old policy, the fund balance policy, was you could set aside 2 to 5% of your revenues for housing and food, so you could afford to refurbish and replace equipment as needed. So we historically have done that anytime we've had some extra money in order to keep up with painting and the beds and just, keeping the establishment, good for the students' experience. So was the big change that you see on our reserves from the 12.1 to the 19 from budget to projected.
Okay, as you can see, we were projecting a $10 million deficit, and we are, then we receive a transfer from the system office of $9.3 million, and we also transfer funding from the reserve to cover the Cisco financing, and that was 1.3. And then we got $2 million from the system office for our banner project. The result is that we are anticipating a surplus of $2.6 million at the end of the year. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that these projections do not include the census date information for spring. That's why these numbers could be different when we come back in May with the end of the year results.
President Toro, first of all, let me just jump in. We realize that the committee, that the transfers, the net transfers and all that needs to be cleared up. There's information in there we understand needs to be expressed and discussed, but I think it's getting mixed in with the idea of how is each campus and the system overall as a going concern. So without getting into the weeds on that, I am going to make a request of management once we get to the end for that to be worked on going forward so we can all come together on that. That aside, can you just explain as briefly as you can so we can stay on time, the last comment that you just made, which is it doesn't take into account, is it census count? I didn't quite follow it. Maybe you could just repeat the last little bit you said about the projections and something that was missing there.
Okay, this data is based on the information we had until the beginning of January, which didn't consider the revenue or deficit because it depends on where the enrollment for spring lands. And if the actual numbers are lower than what we projected, that could cause a deficit. So, and
Understood.
we don't have those numbers yet.
Got it. Final spring enrollment. Makes sense. Okay. Well, hopefully these will come to fruition, and we'll continue to work on refining the reporting. Appreciate the comments from you, Central. Love to see the enrollment growth continued. Let's move to to Eastern if we can.
Good morning, and thank you for giving me the opportunity today to discuss Eastern's mid-year projections for FY26. Unfortunately, Eastern is slightly below budget on the revenue side. That's specific to first-year full-time enrollment being below what we had anticipated. You'll see that tuition, housing, and food are reflective of that. If you note, the tuition and food line is actually more than the tuition line. Eastern, about 90% of first-year students live in residential housing. So not achieving those targets had a significant impact on those two line items. That said, we did a little better on the retention side, which helped offset some of those first-year losses. The university is also unfavorable on interest income, and that's related to funds that are in the short-term investments that the yield is lower, as are our balances. So between the two, the university is short by roughly $1 million, and that's something that we're going to have to consider as we move forward as interest rates change and our fund balances go down. Along the discussion of fund balances, the university is on budget as far as what it had planned to use for institutional reserves. I want to be very specific when I say institutional reserves because we did get office funding that also offset the deficit that we had forecasted, and we certainly appreciate those funds. So Eastern is going to be splitting between operating and capital, 12.3 million put onto its operating reserves. So I just want to highlight that this is probably the first year, from my understanding, if not in Eastern's history, but definitely in the past 10 or so years, where the university has had to use so much in operating funds for deferred maintenance capital projects. So that's something that the university has to consider very closely because we do have projects that have to be complete. These aren't the type of projects that can't. We're talking about boilers in buildings, chillers and dormitories, but that we are in budget. So the key is that the institution is on budget for what we had planned on for institutional funds. You'll note that we do show a surplus deficit difference. I will note, similar to as President Toro had mentioned, that includes the Banner SAS funding that we received from the system. And of course, we're thankful for that. And also some additional funds that were provided to Eastern that were not in the original budget, but were approved during the October board meeting. So if we can go to the next slide. Oh, you will also notice, just to be clear, we do have some savings on the non-salary side, and we're on budget on the salary side. But I will say, as we look into the second half of the year, we're going to be looking at the positions very closely. As positions become open through attrition, we're going to look very closely before refilling. So we plan on being very good stewards of those dollars. If we just turn to the next slide, you'll note the first two lines reflect the use of campus reserves. So again, we had to swap and increase campus reserves for operating a little bit to offset some of those losses, more specifically in interest income. We were able to, some of our projects are actually coming in a little below budget. So we're favorable on the use of reserves for capital repair and replacement projects. And of course, the remainder, just as President Toro pointed out, these are system funds that were provided to, first of all, provide debt relief, which provided operational support for the university. Those were system funds, as well as, just like all the other universities received the Banner SAS funds. And then the university, as part of the budget, received $7 million in institutional support, and then the stabilization funds, as I had discussed earlier. So that's what reflects the small difference in the surplus deficit. But again, the key is that the institution is projecting that it will end the year with the reserves that it had in its budget. That's the highlights. If anyone has any questions.
We're going to try and hold the questions. We have a Q&A block towards the end, so we'll try and hold that for there. But CFO Campbell, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you could move forward to Southern. Okay, Southern, I think we can hand it off here.
Thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here with you today to summarize our mid-year budget. I'll be presenting with Dr. Lillian Manjagi, who I just can't say enough about what a great partnership it's been to work with her on doing all things budgeting for Southern. We are coming into our mid-year with a picture that we are going to be using more of our reserves than we had originally planned. So we're going to unpack that for you, and we do feel really confident that we have strategies in place to ensure that next year our budgeting is more precise in these three areas. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Manjagi at this point to take you through, and then we'll do some questions and answers.
Thank you so much, President Varma. Thank you, board members, for the opportunity to talk about Southern. So on the slide, talking about revenues and expenditures, we had a positive picture in our revenue scenario. We had higher than projected enrollment with a growth of 6.9%, versus the projected 4.8%. So that represented increased revenues than originally budgeted for. We did have additional funding for a student accessibility program, so that was additional appropriations for us. And we also had additional revenues from the increased enrollment, room and board revenues. So that picture in total represented an increase in 1%, in a little over 1% from our projected budget. So projected 217 million, our actual 220. On the expenditure side, we did have higher than projected expenses, like President Obama just discussed. The first category that was over budget was in our institution aid. This year, for the first time, Southern rolled out a merit aid program, and it is very difficult to predict the impact, how many offers will be accepted by our students. And so that not being able to predict that, there was a big difference between what we projected and what the students accepted. So that caused an increase of almost $2.5 million. So budgeted at a little over $14.5 million to an actual of 17.2 by the midpoint. Our food service contract also increased for similar reasons, like President Toro shared, because of our newly negotiated food service contract with Sodexo. So increased from it increased by $1.7 million to a total of 11.2. In addition, our teaching adjunct budget increased by a little by $2.7 million from a budget of $15.3 million to $18 million. A part of that is a lot of full-time vacancies, tenure track faculties that were on hold and had not been filled. So relying more on our adjunct faculty than in previous years when these positions were filled, and a couple of other reasons. So that has led to, in total, a need to add an additional $5 million from our reserves for a total usage of $10.9 million of our reserves. So if you go to the next slide, that shows the use of those reserves. So you will see our original committed use of reserves was $5.9 million. The system generously provided the $8.2 million to help support our operations. And based on this media update, we will use $5.2 additional million to cover for those increases. There were transfers to the system office to cover our debt service. So for our university fee, residence hall and parking garage. And then we have shared contracts. So that's also a part of our transfer. And then the Banner SAS project is a part of that. So that constitutes the transfers for Southern Connecticut. I think that represents
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Southern. Appreciate the update. Certainly looks like there's some work to do here on future, and we look forward to working with you to help do better projections and whatever else we can do to help support the university moving forward. Let's move on to a CT State. Oh, is Western next? I apologize. It is Western. President Bernal, back to Western. Sorry about that.
Yeah, thank you, Regent Santiago. And I just want to start also with thanking our colleagues, the president colleagues and our system office colleagues. As a new president with an interim CFO, they have been tremendously collaborative in helping us understand opportunities and some of the details of a complex budget process. And so what I'm sharing today is a conservative pre-mitigation mid-year forecast. And this is an early transparent heads up so we can stay proactive, disciplined, and aligned. All of these details have been shared at open forums on the West Can campus for full transparency as well. So not all of our mitigation measures have been realized, and we have others underway, and I'll share some of those details. But the variance that you're going to see soon that is driving a greater deficit is primarily driven by net tuition underperformance, and in particular, lower enrollment of part-time students and a miscalculation of how concurrent enrollment students were estimated at the beginning of the fiscal year. There was also an overspend of financial aid. That's somewhat of a good problem that I'll share in a second. And we also had some personnel cost pressures that I'm happy to provide some more details on. But on this first slide, what you see is that our projected revenue is about $1 million less than anticipated. Our projected expenditures are about $3 million more than expected. And we are projecting now a deficit of $18.3 million, so a $5.4 million variance. The $900,000 shortfall in our revenue, again, is mostly driven by the lower than projected enrollment, and we're really driving that now through sharper calculations of part-time enrollment recruitment and re-engagement strategies. As we learned the budget process, there was also a duplication error in which the concurrent enrollment numbers were projected at both the fall and winter terms or spring terms, where they are only counted once in our budget. So we're correcting that moving forward. What's driving the net tuition pressure really is an overspend of $1.4 million in our financial aid. And the reason that I say this is a good problem is because we awarded more than $3 million in addition to what we had planned for merit-based scholarships. And this is really helping us attract a student population with stronger academic preparation. We also have the impact of a loss of $1.8 million in the Roberto Willis State Financial Aid Program for this student population as well. Still, we're going to work better to refine the model for our financial aid work. We use an AI program called TargetX and OTHOT that is helping us refine those expected yields from what we offer through our financial aid packages. So the expenses are really being driven by personnel. And some of those issues are because of planning assumptions related to attrition, where that attrition did not actually occur. And more so where essential positions for health and safety needed to be refilled. So we have currently 492 full-time employees. The original projections in the spending plan was to get us down to 481. That gap translates to that $3.6 million salary and fringe above our spending plan. We are doing a lot to correct this immediately, and we'll continue to do work. I have implemented a pretty robust administrative reorganization that seeks to save the university about $2 million through the elimination of 6 management positions. We are restricting and restructuring our overtime strategy, which expenses about $3 million a year. To find a new way of supplying the important staffing that we need on campus in a more cost-effective manner. We have implemented an across-the-board operating expense reduction of about $1.5 million immediately. And we're implementing greater hiring controls. We have canceled 16 searches as of last week and are asking all of our senior team and directors and hiring managers to come up with new and creative models, asking them to really rethink our strict siloed positions for more generalist and cross-divisional roles. And we're exploring really concertedly shared service opportunities. I want to thank my colleagues at Central, Dr. Toro, and her team for helping us think through some of the unique opportunities and I think really innovative opportunities we're looking to engage in between our 2 campuses. We have adopted a deficit elimination plan with a goal of closing our $13 million deficit by fiscal year 30. Most folks know that I am impatient, and so hoping to do that much sooner. We'll present this at the next board meeting because we will be below the 30-day threshold requirement, and we will be using that as our mitigation plan to continue to reduce the use of reserve and continue to rebuild that. And I'm happy in the next section to provide some more details there. You know, the next slide really covers the general, what has been shared about the support that we're receiving from the system office. So we do plan to use $4.4 million in our reserve. We had originally planned for $1 million. I too want to thank the system office for about $14 million in one-time system support in various ways. And we know, and I've been sharing this with the campus community, that one-time support only buys us time. It's not a solution to a structural issue. And we're dealing with that deficit that has existed for more than a decade at WestConn without a lot of moves to correct it. But we're now taking that fully seriously, and our commitment is disciplined execution so the operating model becomes sustainable. That's through continued efficiencies. We're looking hard at revenue generating opportunities and cost containment. Just in closing, the strategy that we've implemented, which we're calling distinctively WestConn, is also built on investing in innovation and really intentionally building an innovation lane that solely focuses building an infrastructure for ROI and protecting the operating budget. We are using a model that does not create recurring obligations and a disciplined approach that seeks to move from pilot opportunities elevated by our faculty, staff, and students, opportunities to prove the effectiveness of those with ROI as a key indicator. When those are successful, we will institutionalize them with recurring funds, and then we'll reinvest that funding. This effort is being supported by our foundation, and you'll also see a small amount being requested for our reserve use. This is really intended to drive retention and student success, academic transformation, and revenue innovation. So with that, I just want to be clear that we are clear on our drivers. We put controls in place, and we're executing a multi-year plan that improves sustainability while protecting student success, workforce outcomes, and our academic mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President Bernal, and appreciate your understanding of where things are and your intent and your plans to address them. Let's move to CT State, CFO Kelly.
I'll just give some brief opening remarks. CT State is on track for a better than forecasted budget year, thanks in part to the great work of CFO Carrie Kelly. We also have increased revenues right now, and we're grateful for that and projecting ways to continue to grow that. And we have a slightly lower reliance on our reserves this year. And while we are utilizing some of our reserves to balance our budget, we are right now engaged in a strategic planning process for CT State to be able to define our priorities for the next year. So as we are working through the budget for next year, we're very cognizant of the fact that we're going to be defining some longer range priorities, and that includes spending priorities for the near future. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to CFO Carrie Kelly to further expand upon it.
Thank you, President Royal. Good morning, everyone. CT State faces a structural fiscal imbalance, meaning that our expenditures grow faster than our revenues. In the current fiscal year, we have $80 million less than we had in the prior year for revenue. That's because of the expiration of one-time revenues. We knew this was coming, and we've been working to prepare for it. So despite the fact that we had $80 million less in revenue, we had a number of other things we had to fund in the budget. Most importantly among them, inflationary increases, not only for goods and services, but the anticipated wage increases with our bargaining unit that amounts to more than $14.7 million. We had to contend with increases in the medical inflation. We also wanted to do things that would help enhance our ability to respond to this structural fiscal imbalance by investing in the institution, by hiring 37 new full-time positions. Additionally, this budget reflects the reallocation of the HR function, human resources, from System Office Shared Services to CT State. So that's the context of our FY26 budget development. And because of that, we needed to rely on an anticipated $79 million in our reserves. Happily, we will not be needing to use the full $79 million and instead have an improvement of nearly $26.5 million, and will only need to withdraw 52.7. This is primarily because of improvements around revenue. We've had a 2.3% increase in our revenue. We budgeted a flat enrollment, and we have exceeded our conservative estimates with a fall over fall enrollment of 4.3%. That yielded $8.1 million more in tuition and fee revenue. Additionally, because our reserves are so large and we took a conservative approach when budgeting around anticipated interest income, we anticipate receiving an additional $1.7 million in interest income. There's some other minor offsetting changes. We've had a little bit of deterioration in the allowance for doubtful accounts. That's when our students don't pay us. And we've had a little bit of deterioration in educational sales. In terms of expenditures, we've seen a 3% improvement that yields $13.8 million to the bottom line. This is primarily because of personnel. That's our single largest area of expenditure, so it makes perfect sense that that's where we would have the greatest improvement, primarily around full-time employees. We've seen an improvement of about $10.3 million. This is because of our vigorous request to fill process. We manage our attrition very carefully. We've maintained vacancies and we've eliminated a few full-time positions, but we're continuing to hire for key strategic positions. Additionally, we've had some savings in fringe benefits that correspond and mirror with what's happening in full-time. We've had some offsetting net increases in other expenses, primarily because of the increased enrollment. We've had to increase our financial aid to students, which I think is a good problem. Unlike our sister institutions, we have a little bit of a different relationship with the transfers. We don't issue our own debt, so we don't have the same level of complexity, but nearly 10% of our budget goes to support system office and shared services. And so what you see reflected in the transfer outline reflects the cost that we transfer out for the other expenses, the non-personnel costs for shared services and system office. Included in that is the money that system office collects on our behalf and aggregates for the collective bargaining set-aside fund. So these are not just the wage increases, but rather they are funds like professional development, promotion, tenure, and sabbatical. So that's a little bit of a different presentation than you've seen for the CSUs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And if we can move to Charter Oak at this point, that would be great. And let me just also say, President Royal, I appreciate your understanding and my skipping over you. Did not mean to take away your opportunity to talk there, and certainly appreciate the comments that you made.
Excellent.
Chair Ari, I'm going to be very brief and turn this over to Michael Moriarty. The Charter Oak story is really very simple. Enrollment's up. That's why revenues are up. That's also why expenditures are up, because as we enroll more students, we engage. Moriarty, the floor is yours.
Excellent. There's not much of a follow-up to that. Our revenue growth is growing 12% beyond its original budget. Our expenditures are up higher as well because we've had to hire additional adjunct teaching faculty to accommodate this enrollment growth. So our expenditures, while we are going over the original plan, it is to support the direct teaching efforts related to these students. Other than that, I will just mention on the surplus/deficit side, originally we were anticipating running a deficit effectively related to some self-investments in new programs that we were offering. That deficit gap has now been closed because of the increase of enrollment. And I just want to make one point of clarification in the slides that 94% reduction in deficit is black, but it should be green. And so my apologies for the oversight. And that is my update for Charter Oak State College.
Thanks, Charter Oak. Certainly appreciate your update. And if we're going to miss on a color, minus 94 to the positive or a 94% improvement that we have to repeat over and over again is a welcome part of the conversation. Let's hand it over to the system office.
Good morning. The combined system office and shared services are presented on this slide. The key changes to revenue and expenditures represent primarily the collective bargaining set aside that get transferred back to City State. At mid-year, we are projecting $1.8 million loss at the combined system office and shared services, primarily due to two factors. One is the $1.4 million transferred back to city state from prior year collective bargaining set aside. The other is about $430,000 that represent an increase in personnel services attributed to the newly formed compliance and audit function of the system. Now, let me take a moment to clarify the collective bargaining set aside, which they are the main driver of this projection. Originally, we set up $3.9 million for collective bargaining set aside as required by Congress, AFT, and ASHME contracts for city-state bargaining units. By contract, system office budgets those funds centrally, and they are distributed back to city-state throughout the year with the remaining unused balance at year end. Now, in addition, there are separate contract-related accounts that for grievance, equity adjustment, and minority, that those funds roll forward year over year, and they are managed individually for each collective bargaining unit by system office. The next slide shows a simplified look of how system office is funded and what the resources are used for. Now, looking at the boxes, the colored boxes, the blue on the revenue side represents state appropriations. The green represents tuition and fees. The first column shows city-state contribution of $43 million. 24 coming from state appropriation, city-state block grant, and 19 coming from tuition and fees revenue. State universities contribute $9 million from state universities block grant and $5 million from tuition and fees. The only BOR allotment that's allotted directly from the state towards system office functions is the $500,000. Now, to show how the resources are used, the expenditures for system office and shared services are separated to show the functions and beneficiaries of those resources. Most important, most important is the cost sharing. For instance, $17 million, the blue boxes on the expenditure side shows personnel cost, and the yellow represent all other expenses. Now, the system office cost is split share by universities, about 60%, city-state, 37%. The BOR allotment of $500,000 covers about 2%, and Charter Oak contribution is under 1%. On the other side, the shared services are mainly dedicated entirely for city-state. Now, personnel cost of $17 million represents 99% allocated to a city-state and under 1% to Charter Oak. All other expenses of $19 million, $2 million represent the undistributed collective bargaining funds that will transfer eventually back to city-state. And the $17 million, 91% represents IT expenditures, IT infrastructure. What are the shared services costs? IT operations, IT infrastructure, networking security, banner upgrades, and administrative functions such as human resources, payroll, accounts payable, accounts receivable, and purchasing. In conclusion, city-state is the main contributor and beneficiary of shared services. Office, state universities contribute the most towards system office cost. according to the services they receive. More detailed information is
Not picking up audio.
No problem. Thank you, Vice Chair Santiago. We could hear you now.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, thank you very much for this mid-year update. As part of our role in oversight, this was a important presentation. Before I have a request and action I'm going to do, I want to make sure all of the regions who are part of this committee have an opportunity to ask any questions of anything we just saw. So I'll start with Regent Williams. Any questions that you need to ask today?
Yes, it's kind of a technical question, but I noticed the disparity in enrollment meeting the projected budget as to Eastern and Western being down and Southern and Central being up. And what I'm wondering is, does that pretty much correlate with actual enrollment? Because you could budget for a 5% increase and or you could budget for flat enrollment, or you could budget for a 5% decrease. And how we look at this in terms of meeting the targets would not be consistent campus to campus. So, I'm wondering, is it just really good news in terms of Central and Southern, or did they maybe budget a little bit more conservatively? Is there continuity campus to campus in projections for future enrollment?
That's a great question. I think I would normally would direct that to CFO Moriarty. And so, Michael, I'll give you a chance to comment. Don, the one thing I'll just say up front, and I think you're new to the committee from before the last budget approval, so that puts you at a bit of a disadvantage here. I would suggest we maybe take that offline. We can sort of talk through that and how the enrollment numbers were budgeted, and so forth. So I'll take that action and talk to you offline, and certainly we can go through that. But I do want to give CFO Moriarty an opportunity to comment if you feel the comment's necessary.
I was just going to say thank you for the opportunity. I was going to say that each campus is individually responsible for their estimates. And as Central and my other colleagues had pointed out, is that the projections right now do not represent the most updated census numbers that just came in recently. So I wouldn't be in a position to answer that definitively, but I do believe that the subsequent enrollment reports that are based on census date are going to be your best indicator for how we are tracking in enrollment overall as a system.
All right. I'm thinking in terms of the case that we make in terms of presenting our budget to the legislature. One thing that's important is the narrative. And it's in looking at the numbers, it's tempting to say that our bottom line depends on enrollment going up and doing a better job of marketing, that these two things are directly related. I mean, there was a time when some campuses charged just next to nothing, and Edith Prague used to brag about graduating from UConn when it was tuition free. So there was a time when those enrollment revenues weren't directly linked with the value, so to speak, of what our state universities provide on the one hand, and also the commitment that the state of Connecticut should be making on the other hand. So, I mean, that's just something that occurred to me as we were going through it, that there's this tendency as we look at those numbers to just simply say, oh, well, you've got a problem and you guys have got to increase enrollment. But as we confront and we want to try to do that, but as we confront the demographic issues, we also have to be thinking about the value that's provided by our university system as well. And I'll just end that's all that I had.
Thank you, Regent Williams. As always, insightful comments, much appreciated. Regent Yang, anything from your end?
No, thank you for everyone for making the presentation. I think there's definitely further places we need to look into to understand this. I echo the comments that were just made, that it's not just all about playing the game for enrollments. You have to also look not other sources of revenue, obviously from the state, but also how we are managing expenses across the board. Thank you everyone for putting this together for us. This is the beginning of the work after that.
Regent Yang, this is CFO Moriarty. I'm sorry, we could not understand you in the room. We do not know if it's on your end or our end. If there is someone who is dialed in who may be able to relay, or perhaps Regent Yang, if you want to try and just repeat that. But I'm sorry, we could not understand the question in the room.
Okay, I don't know what's going on, but I can't really fix it. So hold on.
I don't know if you have the
Yeah,
availability.
no, it's his connection. Even on the bridge, we can't. And I just was texting with them. He doesn't have any particular general comments, but thanks everyone for their efforts and appreciates the importance of this mid-year update. Is basically the note. I will continue to move forward. I actually have a request that I'm going to make to management based on this. But before I do that, I do want to offer Chancellor Merduko an opportunity to say anything before I close out this section. Chancellor Merduko, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Santiago. Again, let's commend our institutional leaders, our presidents and CFOs for their presentation, along with our system office deputy CFO as well. I just want to touch on, it's evident, and hopefully it's evident to this committee, but hopefully to the public, that we are not a one-size-fits-all system, right? We have 6 distinct institutional complexities and nuances in terms of who they serve, in terms of the demands from an operations standpoint, the populations they're serving, what have you. So it's really important as a system office, and encourage the board that we lend our support in understanding those differences. Additionally, all of our institutional leaders, beginning with our institutional presidents, they hold firm the commitment to holding our students harmless. So yes, there are structural deficits of varying degrees, but our presidents do a phenomenal job putting our students first as it relates to not only the academic offerings, but services provided. As you've seen, there's been a balanced approach in terms of utilizing institutional reserves and system office reserves when necessary, as well as advocacy that the system has been doing behind the scenes with state government. For example, President Toro had mentioned Sodexo and the recent completion of the labor negotiations between the employees and Sodexo at Western, Southern, and Central. We were successfully able to work with the governor's office, and the governor, in his proposed budget, will be providing over the next 4 fiscal years $3.727 million to help offset the cost, the increased cost from food services. So just one of many examples that we're doing collectively to combat, inflationary pressures that we're seeing. And then lastly, you've seen all of our institutions leverage some level of institutional aid, again, putting the needs of our students first and foremost. So I thought it was important to mention that, and that in terms of projected enrollment misses, we're committed to further analysis to support our institutions, but ultimately the institutions are driving their strategies aligned with their strategic priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Merduko. I think, sort of responding back to that comment, I think the importance of CSCU statewide as probably the biggest driver of social and economic mobility and opportunities across our state is unmatched. And we know how important it is to support all these institutions, both individually and collectively, to succeed for the benefit of the state. And I think that's what all of us are doing here. So I appreciate your comments. In terms of today's presentation, the mid-year plan is a constructive step to providing the context and transparency around the system's financial position. And I know and appreciate how much work went into putting together these slides, and more importantly, the underlying work of reforecasting, looking at trends, understanding and trying to communicate the driver of those trends. Building on what we have here today, there is an opportunity to raise the bar in how we report to make it more clear, more concise, easier for us to provide oversight, and hopefully also easier for the CFOs and the presidents and the chancellor to report out on. And so as we go into next year's budgeting cycle, I want to look at opportunities to provide deeper clarity on the items like net transfers, clearly distinguishing between operating deficits from the pre-funding of future expenses, and standardizing how the variances and the surpluses are presented across institutions. Our goal should be clear that consistent reporting that enables the board to fulfill its fiduciary oversight responsibilities without overburdening management should be our mutual goal. So to that end, I am asking and directing management to include an agenda item for our next Finance Committee meeting to present specific and proposed improvements to the financial schedules and materials, including recommended standard conventions and basic quality assurance processes, as well as timing and meeting structure for the committee's review and guidance. So I'll leave that as an ongoing agenda item that we will continue to do. Our goal here should be continuous improvement on this, and I'll look to work with CFO Moriarty and CFO Blanchard when he's available to try and drive this thing forward. And we will work with the CFOs and the presidents of all the institutions to improve this communication. So we'll leave that out there. And before I move to the resolution, I understand Charlene Casamento has her hand up. Charlene?
Thank you, Ari. I appreciate that. I wanted to just share some comments for consideration. In the decade that I was part of the system, our mid-year reports came with some linear enrollment history broken out into groups, which I think gets to Regent Williams' comment. It's hard because we're talking about a lot of ups and downs, but there's no real context for how does that compare to the last couple of years, and what should we glean from that in terms of risk, enrollment risk, or opportunity for the future. The second item, and I've mentioned this in quite a few meetings, there are organizations that have structural challenges, and one of the roles of the board is certainly to ensure that there are plans for the future. And one of those opportunities is the 5-year sustainability plans. I really encourage for there to be some discussion in these board meetings beyond 1 year's worth of planning or the current year of planning. Lastly, because normally the spring enrollment is incorporated, at least it was for the decade I was part of the system, so that regents would have a clear understanding as to where we are in terms of finishing out the year. Since that information wasn't included, I do think that there should be an update that allows for a sense as to whether or not the spring enrollment improved or didn't improve the results that were presented here. So again, comments for consideration as you move forward and look for opportunities to enhance stewardship. And again, thank you so much.
Charlene, thank you so much for your comments. I think those are great. We've got them on the record now. And as we move forward to the improvements, I think we can look at those items as part of the continuous improvement exercise that we run through. Let's thank you for everyone. May I have a motion? Well, actually, let me do this way. I will propose a motion to approve the resolution recommending the full board adopt the fiscal year 26 mid-year spending plan. So I have moved that adoption. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion is approved. The next item on the agenda is the fund balance revenue review. And I will turn this over to President Kalinowski and CFO Moriarty.
Thank you. Okay, so this section really represents a new section for the Finance Committee and is a result of the policy, the fund balance policy that was adopted in May 2025. And so there are a lot more details in the slide deck that I am going to cover verbally. But if we could move to the next slide, I'll recap just a few of those requirements. The main takeaways from this slide is that what the policy requires us to do is that during the mid-year planning meeting, which is today's meeting, each institute is to report their detailed fund balances based on the most recent fiscal year end, which would have been June 30th, 2025, which is fiscal year 2025. As part of that, we are required to calculate how many days of operating costs each institution holds in its reserves, and then campuses that either fall below a 30-day threshold or above a 90-day threshold. There is an action item required at the subsequent Finance Committee meeting where those campuses are to present their action plans to either restore reserves or utilize their reserves down to the appropriate threshold. So with that context, I will do a very brief refresher because I do have to go through, per the policy, all of the fund balances, but there is a focal point on our unrestricted balances being what we calculate that 30 and 90-day threshold on. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Next slide categorizes our four main types of fund balances. We have investments in capital assets, we have restricted funds, and then we have unrestricted funds, which is broken out into two categories. Those two categories are designated funds, which those are funds that have been designated for specific purposes by either campus leadership or our Board of Regents. And then we have our current unrestricted funds, or undesignated, which are available for general use. Next slide, please. So starting off with just the capital assets and our restricted funds, I'll briefly give you a summary of where we are as a system. We have $1.6 billion of invested funds in capital assets. This is net of depreciation, and this is not surprising. We are an infrastructure-heavy system across all arms of the state of Connecticut. When you move over to the restricted positions, non-expendable funds tend to be endowments, and it is expected that we don't have many because they are held with our foundations. And on the expendable side, we do receive funds that have restrictions from outside parties. These could be grants, regulatory restrictions. There's a host of items, but these are restrictions that are placed outside of management. Next slide, please. And so in front of you here is a summary of our unrestricted net position. And what you'll see in front of you is by campus, this shows the unrestricted net position, AKA reserves, broken down by each of our campuses. On the left-hand side, we have the designated funds that either campus leadership or the Board of Regents has placed designations on for a specific use. In the middle column represents your current unrestricted or undesignated funds. And these are the amounts that are available for general use. And to the right-hand side, you have your total unrestricted net position, which agrees to our audited financial statements. I realize this may be the first time some of you are seeing this collectively. This is a requirement of our new board policy. But in total, these agree to our audited financial statements. And what the takeaway here is that in total, we have a little over $700 million worth of reserves. But in actuality, $490 million of those dollars have already been designated for use, leaving us a little over $200 million that are available for general use or future designations. And it is on that amount that each campus is required to calculate their benchmark, and that 30-day to 90-day threshold applies, which I'm going to show you next. Next slide, please. So this next slide applies the benchmark, and it takes the current unrestricted balance from the prior page. Per our policy, we take these unrestricted funds and divide it by our daily operating costs. Those daily operating costs come from our audited financial statements from the last fiscal year. And then it calculates out how many days worth of operating expenses we have in reserve. So I tried my best to do some color coding on the slide here. And what you will see is that Eastern and Western are both below that 30-day threshold. This requires an action item. Campus leadership is prepared on those campuses to present at the next finance committee what those action plans will be. We also have Charter Oak, which is above the 90-day threshold. So Charter Oak will also have to establish an action plan. And so the leadership, as I said before, at Eastern and Western are aware of this and will prepare action plans and submit them to this committee at the next scheduled Finance Committee meeting in March. For Charter Oak, President Klonowski already has an action plan and will be presenting it today for the committee's consideration to adopt today. Before I move into the presentation of Charter Oak's plan, I wanted to pause and turn the floor back over to Vice Chair Santiago to understand if we have any questions. And before I do so, I will just mention that detailed slides for each campus have been included in the committee materials today. We do not intend to go through every single item as a function of time, but it breaks down where all of those designations and what commitments have been made on those campuses. So with that being said, Vice Chair Santiago, I turn this back over to you.
CFO Moriarty, thank you very much. Presentation was very clear from my perspective, and appreciate you doing so, and look forward to the plans for Eastern and Western next month and Charter Oak this month. Before we move to that plan, I just want to pause for a moment and see if any of the regents or ex officios or anyone else has a comment they'd like to make or a question before we go to the Charter Oak plan.
No, that was clear.
Excellent. I don't see any hands up. So if there's nothing in the room, then we'll go on. But let's get the plan here from Charter Oak. President Klonowski, it's your turn.
CFO Moriarty will explain our plan. Thank you.
Okay, so for Charter Oak's plan, it's effectively a two-pronged plan. First, President Klonowski's action plan is looking to utilize $2 million worth of reserves to research, design, and initiate artificial intelligence solutions intended to improve efficiency and strengthen student success outcomes at the college. Where practical, the resulting tools and approaches would be made available to all of our campuses to leverage at their own discretion, particularly in the areas where we share or overlap technology, such as our learning management platform, which is Blackboard. This is very much a research and development venture where we are looking to research as a campus and deploy the solutions to improve student outcomes and efficiencies on campus. The second piece of the plan is President Klonowski is requesting board approval to defer the development of a broader reserve utilization plan for the remaining excess reserves at Charter Oak to the incoming president to submit as part of their inaugural budget plan, which would be the fiscal year 28 budget presented in early calendar 2027. And President Klonowski is here today to answer any questions, but I will make it just a small informal point that this particular plan allows the incoming president to be the one to strategize a longer-term solution for Charter Oak and provides reserves to do so, where that incoming president will have funds available to enact the plan that they come up with. And so what I would like to do is I just want to turn it over to President Klonowski in case I missed anything, and then I will turn it back over to Vice Chair Santiago.
Did a great job, CFO Moriarty. Just a reminder that back in 2018, we had almost no reserves. So to get to this current positive position, the college has been working for a very long time to reach a point where it could now begin to reinvest in itself. And this is part of that plan. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, I'll take the lead. I have my own comment, which I can save to the end. Are there any questions or comments from the other regions? I don't see any hands up. Give another second here. If there's no one in the room with their hand up, then I will move forward. I'll move forward then. Just two quick comments. First one is the opportunity to invest generally in improvements in any part of our system is a welcome conversation. I'm very happy to hear it. I think the idea of being able to look at an opportunity to invest in ways to automate or leverage artificial intelligence to drive improvements for the learners that we serve and to make our system more efficient is great. And the idea to be able to share those learnings across is something that will make our system better. And I look forward to more of those systemness conversations as we move forward. And lastly, having been the incoming leader of organizations in my own life, the idea of coming in to a pot of resources to be able to go ahead and move my initiatives forward would be quite the luxury. So I appreciate that we have that opportunity for the next leader of Charter Oak, and I'm sure that person will appreciate that as well. But that all being said, I'd like to ask for a motion for the resolution that recommends the full board adopt the Charter Oak State College Fund Balance Plan. So can I get a motion to approve that, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Regent Williams. Can I get a second? Second, thank you, Regent Yang. Without any other further discussion, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. The motion is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item we've got a couple quick informational items. You're welcome. A couple quick informational items to get going on. So I will hand over, actually, CFO Moriarty, who's going to be taking on these last informational items? Is it you?
Yes, I could summarize these items briefly, and then I would just, kind of open it up for question in case there's any last questions on it. But the two informational items that you have in your packet are contracts that constitute informational items to go to this committee and then our full board. There will be several of these that come through the committees across time. And so these two particular contracts, one of them is an electrical services reverse auction. This particular contract is exempt from requiring Board of Regent approval, mostly due to the quick turnarounds necessary to execute the paperwork. This is an explicit provision that's provided within the contracting policy. And then the second item is from Central Connecticut State University that falls between $1 million and $2.5 million. And I'm happy to affirm that all of the procurement requirements were followed and that there's no concerns. And so the Finance Committee or I will say management will work with the Finance Committee to continue to tailor how we present this information to the Finance Committee, as there will be tens, if not hundreds of contracts that will come through the materials as informational items. But for the two today, I will turn it back over and just ask if there's any specific questions or concerns that could be addressed, that need to be addressed. We have the appropriate folks in the room to do so.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just want to reiterate the point that this is the new policy that we put into place where contracts over $2.5 million require board approval, except in some certain circumstances, such as this reverse auction. And in other scenarios, the informational item, no approval needed, which is the other item today, as CFO Moriarty said. And then, of course, there's items that fall below that, which don't raise up. So I think two items I would just say. One is, as we move forward, to continue to think about if this policy is working or not, and let's give it at least a good year or more to see if it becomes effective in helping to sort of manage the expenditures, which was the goal. But otherwise, I would say thank you to everyone on the management team who helped to make sure that these items are making it onto the agenda. We rely on you to follow those policies and certainly appreciate the work you put in to make sure the policies are followed. Before we move forward, and the next item on the agenda is adjournment. So before we move forward to adjournment, does anyone have any questions about those final informational items? Hearing, oh, go ahead. Regent Williams, you have something to ask?
No.
Oh, excellent. Okay, then in that case, I will be moving to adjourn. I just wanted to thank everybody again for the time it took to prepare for this and their diligence in focusing on providing concise and swift updates so that we could manage to do this meeting on time. And in fact, looks like we'll drop a minute or so early. So with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I will second that adjournment motion. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much for everyone for participating.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
folks, the live stream has ended.